It was one of those bright afternoons when the world feels alive. The sun was high, the breeze carried the sound of laughter, and people gathered near the beachside park for a charity event. Children ran around with ice cream, families took pictures, and music played softly through the speakers. It was supposed to be just another happy day. Among the crowd were two familiar faces, The Rock and John Cena, both there to support a youth fitness campaign. They had just finished a light workout session with a group of kids and were now mingling with fans, smiling for photos and signing autographs. Despite the cameras, their energy was genuine. The Rock joked with a small boy about eating his vegetables, while Cena crouched down to sign a little girl's pink hat. Everything felt easy, normal, joyful, but then something subtle broke through that calm. The Rock was mid-sentence when he noticed a flicker of light near the edge of the beach. At first, it seemed like sunlight bouncing off a phone screen, but the light kept flashing, quick, deliberate, rhythmic. It didn't look random. His smile faded just a little as he squinted in that direction. A few yards away, standing near the rocks, was a young girl, maybe 17 or 18. Her hands trembled as she waved her phone, flashing it in short bursts. Her face carried panic. The crowd around her didn't seem to notice. Most people were focused on the main stage where music was still playing. The Rock leaned slightly toward Cena and said quietly, "Do you see that?" Cena followed his gaze and nodded. His military-trained instincts kicked in immediately. The pattern wasn't just random waving, it was Morse code, SOS. Without hesitation, they both started moving toward her. The crowd parted slowly, a few fans thinking it was another photo moment. But when they saw the urgency on the men's faces, they stepped aside. The air shifted. The playful atmosphere began to fade as people turned to see what was going on. When they reached her, the girl looked terrified. Her voice was shaky and barely above a whisper. "Please," she said, "my little brother, he's out there." He fell into the water. I tried calling for help, but no one listens. The Rock's expression softened immediately. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Hey, it's okay. You did good. We're here now." Cena's eyes scanned the water. The tide had risen slightly, waves crashing harder against the rocks. He didn't see anything at first, just foam and ripples. Then, for a split second, he caught sight of movement. A small hand pushing weakly above the surface, then disappearing. His stomach tightened. He turned back quickly. "Call for rescue," he shouted to the nearby staff. "Get lifeguards and medics here now." The Rock stayed beside the girl, asking her name and trying to calm her down. She could barely speak, her breath coming fast. "He was playing near the rocks," she stammered. "I told him to stay back, but he slipped." I screamed, but everyone thought we were just messing around. The Rock nodded, keeping his tone calm but steady. "You did the right thing. Stay right here. We'll get him." By now, a small crowd had gathered, phones raised instinctively. The Rock turned sharply toward them, his voice firm. "Put the phones down. Call emergency if you haven't already. Stop recording and help." Something about his tone snapped people out of it. A few rushed to alert lifeguards. Others began scanning the waves. The music stopped. The laughter faded. The only sound now was the wind, the crashing waves, and the occasional shout for help. Cena had already kicked off his shoes and sprinted toward the rocks. The water was cold, the waves aggressive, but he didn't hesitate. He dove in strong and fast. For a moment, only his head could be seen bobbing between the swells. The Rock stayed at the shore, guiding him with hand signals and shouting whenever he thought he saw movement. The girl knelt down, her hands clasped tightly together. "Please, please find him," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. Minutes felt like hours. The Rock could see Cena fighting against the pull of the current, his powerful strokes cutting through the water. Then finally he saw Cena grab something, a small body floating face down. He turned the boy over and began swimming back, struggling against the waves that refused to cooperate. Lifeguards had arrived by then, jumping in with rescue boards. The Rock ran closer to the edge, ready to pull them up as soon as they reached the shallows. His heart pounded. For all his strength and confidence, in that moment he felt completely human, just another person praying for a miracle. As they reached the shore, Cena lifted the boy gently and laid him down on the sand. The Rock dropped beside him, checking for a pulse. Nothing. The lifeguards began CPR immediately. The girl screamed and tried to rush forward, but The Rock caught her, holding her back gently. "Let them work," he said softly. They're helping him. The crowd was completely silent now. Some people cried. Others stood frozen. Even the ocean seemed quieter, as if holding its breath. Cena knelt beside the lifeguards, helping however he could. Water poured from the boy's mouth, but his chest still didn't rise. The Rock whispered under his breath, "Come on, little man. Come on." After what felt like forever, the boy suddenly coughed. Once. Then again, harder this time. His body jerked slightly as he gasped for air. The sound broke through the tension like thunder. Cheers erupted from the crowd. Tears streamed down faces, and even the Rock felt his throat tighten. The girl collapsed against him, sobbing uncontrollably. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her like she was his own child. "He's okay," he whispered, barely able to keep his own voice steady. "He's breathing." Paramedics arrived moments later, carefully checking the boy and preparing to take him to the hospital. Cena, drenched and exhausted, sat back on the sand, staring at the sky. His chest heaved as he caught his breath. The Rock walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder, and nodded silently. No words were needed. People began clapping, not for fame, not for performance, but for the sight of real humanity. A few even apologized to the girl for not listening sooner. She didn't respond, still clutching her brother's small hand as the medics lifted him onto the stretcher. The Rock walked with her to the ambulance, helping her climb inside. "He's going to be fine," he said. "You did everything right. You got help. You didn't give up." She nodded weakly, her voice trembling as she whispered, "I thought no one saw me. I thought no one cared." He smiled gently. "Someone always sees. You just have to keep signaling." When the ambulance drove off, the crowd began to disperse. The event resumed slowly, but it wasn't the same. People talked quietly among themselves, some reflecting, some promising to pay more attention next time they saw someone in distress. Cena finally stood up, brushing the sand from his arms. "You ever notice," he said half to himself, "how sometimes the smallest act, just noticing, can change everything?" The Rock nodded. "Yeah. Most people look, but they don't see." For the rest of the afternoon, the two stayed to make sure the area was clear and the girls' belongings were taken care of. Reporters tried to approach them, but both men declined to comment. "It's not about us," the Rock said simply. "It's about what happens when people care." As the sun began to dip behind the waves, the sky turned golden. The crowd had gone home. The beach was quiet again. The Rock stood for a long time, staring at the ocean, thinking about the girl's trembling hands flashing that SOS. How close her brother had been to being lost forever. How easy it is for people to miss the signs around them. Cena walked up beside him, still dripping from the ocean, and said quietly, "She didn't give up. That's why he's alive." The Rock nodded. "Yeah. Sometimes courage looks like shouting into the wind and hoping someone listens." They both stood there for a while, watching the tide roll in and out. The same waves that had nearly taken a life just an hour earlier, now calm and peaceful. It was as if the sea itself had decided to rest. The girl's SOS had reached the right eyes at the right moment, and that small signal, seen by two men who refused to ignore it, had made all the difference. The evening air was cool when the Rock and Cena finally left the beach. They were quiet, walking side by side toward the parking lot. The sounds of the ocean still echoed behind them. Gentle waves rolling, seagulls calling, the same sea that had nearly taken a young boy's life just hours earlier. Both men felt the weight of what had happened, but in their silence was peace. The boy was alive. That was all that mattered. Before they left, the Rock looked back one more time at the spot where it all happened. He could still picture the girl's trembling hands flashing that SOS signal, her face pale with fear, and her brother's small body being pulled from the water. It felt surreal, like something that could have ended so differently if they hadn't noticed. The next morning, the Rock's phone buzzed nonstop. News of the rescue had already started spreading online. Photos of him and Cena helping the girl had been posted everywhere. Thousands of comments poured in, people praising their quick response and calling them heroes. But both men refused interviews. When reporters reached out, Cena simply said, "We did what anyone should do." Later that day, they visited the hospital where the boy was recovering. The girl was sitting beside his bed, holding his hand, her eyes red but calm. When she saw them walk in, she stood quickly, unsure what to say. The Rock gave a warm smile and said softly, "Hey, we just wanted to check in." "How's he doing?" She wiped her eyes and nodded. "He's okay." The doctor said he just needs rest. If you hadn't seen me, I don't think. Her voice broke and she couldn't finish the sentence. Cena stepped closer and said gently, "You did what you were supposed to. You didn't give up. That's the reason he's here today." Her brother stirred slightly on the bed, his small voice weak but clear. "Are you the guys from TV?" he asked. The Rock laughed quietly. "Something like that," he said, kneeling down beside him. "You scared us all out there, kid. Next time, stay away from those rocks, okay?" The boy smiled faintly and nodded. His sister laughed through her tears, grateful for a moment that felt light after so much fear. Before leaving, The Rock handed the boy a small toy wrestling belt he'd brought along. "For the toughest little fighter I've met this week," he said. The boy's eyes lit up and he held it close as if it were treasure. Outside the hospital, the sky was cloudy, but the mood felt bright. Cena took a deep breath and said, "You know, I've seen a lot of things, but that look in her eyes when we got there, that was something else." The Rock nodded. "Yeah, the kind of fear you never forget, but also the kind of courage that saves lives." They both stood for a moment in silence, thinking about how many people might have missed that SOS. How easy it was for the world to look away until it was too late. That night, the story spread even more. News anchors replayed clips, fans wrote messages of support, and social media flooded with praise. But for The Rock and Cena, it wasn't about attention. They had seen the real thing. The helplessness in the girl's eyes, the fight in the boy's small body, the relief when he finally breathed again. Those moments couldn't be captured by cameras. A few days later, the charity organization held a small gathering to thank everyone who helped that day. The girl and her brother attended too. She looked healthier, more at ease, and her brother, though still weak, smiled proudly every time someone mentioned how brave he had been. When The Rock took the stage to speak, the crowd fell silent. He looked around at the faces, families, children, volunteers, and spoke slowly, his deep voice carrying warmth. "That day," he said, "we saw how fast life can change. One moment it's laughter and sunshine. The next it's fear and silence. But we also saw how powerful it is when someone pays attention. That young girl didn't stop signaling for help even when no one listened. That's courage. And if there's something to learn from this, it's that small actions matter. They can save lives." The room erupted in applause, but The Rock didn't smile for long. His eyes softened. "There are a lot of people out there who send out their own signals," he continued. "They might not be flashing lights on a beach. Maybe they're quiet cries for help that go unnoticed. Let's be the kind of people who don't walk past them." Cena stepped up beside him, adding, "You don't have to be famous, strong, or rich to help someone. You just have to care. That's all it takes." The applause grew louder, and for a moment, the entire hall felt connected by something invisible but real: empathy. After the event, the girl approached them again, holding a small envelope. "I wanted to give you something," she said shyly. Inside was a handwritten note that simply read, "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." The Rock read it quietly, then looked at her with a gentle smile. "That means more than anything," he said. "You take care of your brother. He's lucky to have you." As they left the building, Cena looked over and said, "You know, that note's gonna stay with you forever, huh?" The Rock chuckled. "Yeah, reminds me that being seen can change everything, even for us." The days passed and life went back to normal. Both men returned to their schedules, training, filming, charity work, but something about that afternoon stayed with them. They began speaking more openly about paying attention to others, about small kindnesses that make a big difference. Weeks later, The Rock received another message, a photo from the girl. It showed her and her brother standing together at the same beach, smiling at the sunset. Below the picture was a short caption, "This place used to scare me. Now it reminds me of hope." He stared at it for a long time before replying, "That's the spirit. Keep shining." What neither of them expected was how far the story would travel. People around the world started sharing it, calling it the day the SOS was seen. It inspired many to learn basic rescue signals and water safety. Some schools even included the story in awareness programs, teaching kids to never ignore someone in distress. In interviews later, when people tried again to call them heroes, Cena said something simple but powerful. "If we're heroes, then so is every person who decides to care." The story became a reminder that fame isn't what makes a person good. It's what they do when no one's watching that defines them. The Rock often mentioned the moment in his speeches, saying it taught him more than any movie role or championship ever could. But beyond all the praise and recognition, the real victory was quieter. A young boy who got to grow up, a sister who learned that courage means refusing to be ignored, and two men who walked away reminded that the world still needs people who listen, people who see. Months later, when The Rock returned to that same beach for another event, he took a short walk to the rocks where everything happened. The tide was calm, the sky painted in shades of orange and gold. For a moment he closed his eyes, hearing faint echoes of that day, the fear, the shouting, the relief. Then he smiled because now all he could hear was peace. A small voice behind him said, "Hey." He turned around and saw the same boy, now stronger, running toward him with his sister. She waved, smiling wide. The boy wore the little wrestling belt around his waist. "You came back," the boy said proudly. "I did," The Rock replied, crouching to his level. "And look at you, as stronger than ever." The boy grinned. "I'm learning to swim now. My sister says I'll be better than John Cena." The Rock laughed. "You tell him that when you see him next." As the three of them stood by the water, the girl looked out at the horizon and said softly, "It's strange. I used to hate this place, but now it feels like it gave me something back." The Rock nodded. "That's life. Sometimes the same place that breaks you ends up showing you how strong you are." They stayed there for a while, watching the sun sink into the ocean. It was quiet, peaceful, and full of gratitude. When they finally said goodbye, The Rock turned once more toward the waves. The world moved on as it always does, but that day, the day a girl's signal was seen, would always stay in his heart. Because it wasn't just about saving someone from the sea. It was about seeing the unseen, hearing the unheard, and remembering that one small act of compassion can echo longer than we ever imagine. A few months had passed since that day on the beach. Life had gone back to normal for most people, but not for The Rock or Cena. Something about that experience had stayed with them. The urgency of that SOS, the fear in the girl's eyes, the relief when her brother breathed again. It wasn't something that faded away. It kept coming back in quiet moments, reminding them that no amount of fame or success could compare to saving a life. One morning, The Rock was getting ready for a talk show interview. The topic was supposed to be his new movie, but as he sat in the dressing room, he noticed a photo taped to the mirror. The picture the girl had sent months ago. The one of her and her brother smiling at the beach. He had kept it there as a reminder. When the host brought up the rescue story during the show, the audience applauded, expecting him to give a light-hearted answer. But The Rock leaned forward and said, "That day wasn't about being a hero. It was about being human." That girl kept signaling even when no one noticed. That kind of strength, that's what saved her brother. His voice was calm, but the sincerity in his eyes touched the audience. After that interview, the clip spread quickly. People shared it online with messages like, "Be the one who sees the SOS." Teachers used it in classrooms, and charities began campaigns about awareness and helping others in distress. Meanwhile, Cena was busy visiting schools for motivational talks. One day after finishing a session, a student approached him quietly. She said, "I saw that video about the SOS story. It made me check on my classmate who's been sad lately. She told me she was really struggling. Maybe I helped her just by noticing." Cena smiled and said, "That's exactly what it's all about. You don't need to save someone from the ocean to make a difference. Sometimes it's just about listening." Word about that conversation reached The Rock too, and he couldn't help but smile. The story that began with a flash of light on a beach was now inspiring people to look closer, to pay attention to others. That, he thought, was the real impact. A few weeks later, both of them got an invitation to a youth event being held in the same coastal town where the rescue happened. It was organized by local schools to honor real-life acts of courage. The Rock agreed immediately, and Cena cleared his schedule to join. When they arrived, the atmosphere was warm and lively. Kids held small flags, banners with messages like, "One act can change everything," waved in the wind, and local musicians played soft tunes. In the front row, The Rock noticed two familiar faces, the girl and her younger brother. They looked healthier, happier, and full of life. When it was their turn to speak, Cena started by saying, "Courage doesn't always look like what you see in movies. Sometimes it looks like a scared person who refuses to give up. That day we didn't save that boy alone, his sister did. She never stopped calling for help, and that's something we all can learn from. The audience clapped, some wiping tears. The girl looked down shyly, not used to so much attention. The Rock stepped up next and said, "We all get busy. We all look at our phones, our lives, our problems. But sometimes the biggest thing we can do is look up, really look, and see who around us needs help." After the speeches, they took photos with the children. The boy ran up to the Rock holding a notebook filled with drawings. He flipped through the pages to show sketches of the beach, the rescue, and the toy wrestling belt the Rock had given him. "I'm going to be a lifeguard when I grow up," he said proudly. The Rock grinned. "That's a great goal, little man. You'll be saving lives for real." Cena crouched next to him and added, "And remember, it all started because your sister was brave." The girl smiled, looking out toward the water. The same beach that once held so much fear now looked peaceful, waves rolling gently under the sun. As the day went on, both men joined the kids in games, laughter, and stories. They signed autographs, took photos, and even helped serve food at the stalls. But what mattered most wasn't the event. It was seeing how one small act of courage had rippled through an entire community. That night, after everyone had gone home, The Rock and Cena stayed back for a few minutes. The beach was quiet again. The only sound was the soft hum of the waves. Cena picked up a small shell from the sand and said, "It's strange. A moment that lasted a few minutes ended up changing so many lives." The Rock nodded. "That's how real moments work. They don't fade just because the cameras are gone." He looked toward the water, remembering the fear in the girl's eyes that day. "You know," he said, "when she was signaling, I almost didn't notice. I was talking to someone, laughing. If I'd looked away for just one more second..." Cena finished his sentence for him. Things could have ended differently. They both fell silent. The sky was dark now, scattered with stars. The world was calm, but inside, both men felt a quiet mix of gratitude and humility. Over the following months, both The Rock and Cena continued using their platforms to spread messages about awareness and compassion. They supported training programs that taught people how to recognize distress signals and respond to emergencies. It wasn't about fame anymore, it was about responsibility. One day, during a live charity event, The Rock shared something personal. "After that day," he said, "I started thinking about how often we walk past people who are silently signaling for help. Not with lights or waves, but with words, expressions, or even silence. It made me change the way I see people. I try to look deeper now." His honesty struck a chord with millions. People started writing letters, sharing their own experiences of helping others or being helped. It became a movement, small but powerful. Months later, the girl sent another message. This time it was a video. In it, she stood with her brother on a lifeguard training field, both wearing red rescue shirts. She smiled shyly at the camera and said, "I used to think people only cared about what happens in movies. But that day showed me that real heroes are everywhere. They just need to notice." The Rock played that video for Cena while they were filming together. When it ended, neither of them spoke for a while. Then Cena said softly, "That's the best reward we could ever get." The Rock nodded. "Yeah, because it's not about being in front of the camera. It's about being present in the moment." Later that evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset, The Rock said, "You know what stays with me the most? The way she never stopped signaling. She didn't care if people thought she was crazy. She just kept going." Cena smiled. "That's real strength, doing the right thing even when no one believes you." They both laughed quietly, feeling a rare sense of peace. In a world that moved too fast, they had found meaning in a single act of awareness. Years later, the story of that day still circulated online. People retold it in schools, shared it on social media, and even adapted it into short films. But every version carried the same message: someone cared enough to see. And while The Rock and Cena continued with their careers, what they did that day was never about celebrity. It was about human connection and something deeper, quieter, and far more powerful. Sometimes, when The Rock scrolled through his phone and saw that old photo, the one of the smiling siblings on the beach, he'd pause, take a deep breath, and smile. Not because it made him proud, but because it reminded him of something simple yet profound. In a world full of noise, one moment of compassion can still echo louder than everything else. That's what stayed with them both. Not the applause. Not the headlines, but the memory of a small, frightened girl who refused to stop shining her light into the dark, and two men who were wise enough to notice it, and that was the real story. Not about fame or strength, but about humanity itself. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't lifting weights or winning matches, it's lifting someone's hope when it's sinking fast. That's what The Rock and Cena did that day. They didn't just save a boy, they reminded the world to look closer, listen harder, and never walk past a signal for help again. The months after the rescue passed in a blur of normal life for most people, but for the girl and her brother, every day felt like a new beginning. School routines continued, but there was an unspoken sense of pride and quiet courage in her movements. She no longer stayed on the sidelines, no longer hesitated to speak when something felt wrong. The memory of that day had changed her, and she carried it like a gentle fire. The fire of knowing that she had the strength to act, and that someone had listened. Her brother, once small and timid, had grown braver too. His days of being afraid of water were behind him. Every time he saw the ocean, instead of fear, there was respect. Respect for its power and gratitude for the people who had saved him. He practiced swimming with his friends, careful to follow safety rules, and even volunteered in local water safety programs, learning from lifeguards who admired his determination. Meanwhile, The Rock and Cena continued their own routines. But the rescue had subtly changed them too. Every time they visited schools, hospitals, or communities, they shared the story. Not as a tale of heroism, but as a lesson in awareness and empathy. Their words were simple but powerful. They didn't speak of fame, wealth, or strength. They spoke about looking, listening, and acting when it mattered most. One afternoon, they received an unexpected invitation. The girls' school had organized a special ceremony to honor real-life acts of courage, and they wanted both men to attend. When The Rock and Cena arrived, they were greeted with cheers, flowers, and hand-drawn cards from students. The girl and her brother stood at the front, holding a small banner that read, "Courage can be seen." The ceremony began with a quiet speech from the principal, who praised the siblings' bravery. "In a world where people often look away," she said, "these two taught us that courage is sometimes quiet, sometimes small, but always powerful." The Rock stepped forward, smiling at the audience. "I remember the first time I saw her signal," he said. "It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simple, small, and easy to miss, but she kept going. And that small action saved her brother's life." The audience listened in silence, many visibly moved. The Rock didn't need to embellish the story. The truth itself was enough. Every pause, every detail carried weight. "The lesson here," he continued, "is that we all have the power to notice when someone is struggling. Sometimes noticing is enough to change everything." Cena joined him, nodding. "And it doesn't have to be heroic in the traditional sense. It's not about running into the ocean or risking your life. Sometimes it's about taking a moment to listen, to see, to respond. That's how we all become heroes in our own way." After the speeches, the siblings stepped forward. The girl held out her hand toward The Rock. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me when no one else did." He took her hand gently, smiling. "It wasn't just me, it was all of us, and you were brave too." Her brother held out the toy wrestling belt The Rock had given him months ago. "For you," he said shyly. "To remember that day." The Rock accepted it humbly. "I'll keep it," he said. "But the real prize is knowing you're both safe and strong." As the ceremony ended, the students surrounded them for photos. Laughter and excitement filled the room. The siblings walked among them proudly, their confidence growing with each smile and kind word. For the girl, this was more than recognition. It was validation. She had been heard, believed, and supported, and that gave her the courage to keep acting with compassion in the future. Later, outside the school, The Rock and Cena spoke quietly. "You ever think about how many people out there might be sending their own signals?" The Rock asked. Cena nodded. "All the time. And most of the time no one notices. That's why it's so important to pay attention, even when it feels small or inconvenient." They walked along the quiet streets near the school, talking about the ripple effect of small actions. The girl's courage had not only saved her brother, but had also inspired hundreds of students and community members. The idea that one act of attention could grow into something much larger was both humbling and motivating. Back at home, the siblings spent time reflecting on the changes in their lives. The girl started a small community group at school focused on awareness and helping others. She called it the Signal Project. Its mission was simple: teach students to recognize distress, to offer help, and to never ignore cries for assistance. The group grew quickly, with volunteers eager to make a difference. Her brother joined the local swimming program, learning to rescue others safely. He wanted to become a lifeguard one day, not just to save lives but to teach people the importance of staying alert and prepared. Both siblings had learned a powerful lesson. Courage wasn't just about facing danger. It was about paying attention and acting when it mattered. The Rock and Cena heard about these efforts and decided to support them. They sent letters of encouragement, signed memorabilia, and even arranged for a few local heroes to visit the school and speak with the students. The gesture wasn't about publicity. It was about nurturing a community of care and responsibility. One day, the Rock received a call from the girl's mother. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice full of emotion. "You and John saved my son's life. You also gave my daughter the confidence to believe in herself. I don't think I can ever truly repay you." The Rock's voice was calm, warm. "You don't need to repay us. All we did was see someone in need. That's all any of us can do," Cena added. "The real reward is seeing her and her brother grow into confident, caring individuals. That's worth more than anything." Months turned into a year and the siblings continued to thrive. The girls' group expanded, organizing safety workshops and awareness campaigns. The boy excelled in swimming competitions, always emphasizing the importance of preparation and attention. Their story became a symbol of hope in their community, reminding people that even small acts could lead to significant change. Meanwhile, the Rock and Cena used their influence to further spread awareness. They partnered with safety organizations, appeared in campaigns, and spoke at events about paying attention to the people around you. They emphasized that heroism didn't always mean fighting or strength. Sometimes it meant noticing a signal, believing in someone, and acting with compassion. The story of that day on the beach became more than a local legend. It inspired other communities to take safety seriously, taught children the importance of vigilance, and reminded adults that even small acts of care could have life-saving consequences. One afternoon, the Rock visited the siblings again. They walked along the shore, the same beach where it had all started. The boy ran ahead, testing his swimming skills in the shallow waves while his sister watched, her eyes bright with pride. The Rock crouched next to them and said, "You both have grown so much. I'm proud of you, not just for surviving that day, but for using it to make your lives and the lives of others better." The girl smiled. "We couldn't have done it without you and John. You believed in us when no one else did." He shook his head gently. "It wasn't just us. You had the courage to signal for help, and that made all the difference." Cena joined them, holding a frisbee. He tossed it to the siblings, and they laughed, chasing after it. For a few hours, the past fears felt far away, replaced by joy, trust, and hope. As the sun began to set, the Rock and Cena sat on the sand, watching the waves. The girl and her brother ran in and out of the water, carefree and alive. Both men reflected on the ripple effect of that one afternoon, the courage, the compassion, and the awareness that had saved a life and inspired so many. Cena said quietly, "It's amazing how one small moment can change so much." The Rock nodded. "Yeah, and it all starts with noticing. That's the real power." The siblings came running back, dripping with seawater, their laughter mixing with the sound of the waves. For a moment, everything felt simple and perfect, a reminder that even in a complex world, small actions rooted in compassion could create something lasting and beautiful. By the time they left the beach that evening, both the Rock and Cena knew that their lives had been touched in ways they couldn't fully explain. It wasn't about recognition, awards, or headlines. It was about the quiet satisfaction of knowing that they had helped someone see hope and given them the confidence to continue spreading it. And in the hearts of the siblings, the memory of that day, the fear, the bravery, and the compassion became a guiding light. They had learned that courage isn't just about facing danger. It's about noticing others, believing in them, and taking action when it matters most. It was a lesson that would stay with all of them forever. Time moved on, but the memory of that day at the beach never faded for anyone involved. The girl and her brother had grown stronger, more confident, and more aware of the world around them. Every morning when she walked to school, she noticed small things: a classmate sitting alone, a child struggling with homework, a friend who looked upset. She understood now that help didn't always have to be big or dramatic. It could be as simple as offering a kind word or just being present. Her brother had become more cautious and careful, but also braver than before. He still loved the ocean, but he respected its power. Every time he swam, he thought about that day, remembering the hands that had pulled him out of danger. He practiced life-saving techniques, determined to be someone who could help others if needed. The small gestures of courage and care he had witnessed inspired him to make a difference in his own way. The Rock and Cena continued their work, traveling, filming, and participating in events, but they often thought back to that small coastal town. The SOS signal, the fear and the bravery of a young girl had reminded them of what truly mattered in life. Beyond the lights, the cameras, and the applause, the real value was in noticing, caring, and acting when it counted. One morning, months after the school ceremony, The Rock received a message from the girl. She had written a letter, folded carefully, explaining how much that day had changed her life. She told him that she had started a small project in her community to teach children how to look out for each other. She wrote about the pride she felt seeing her brother help younger kids learn to swim safely, and she thanked him for believing in them when no one else had. The Rock read the letter slowly, letting each word sink in. He showed it to Cena later that day. Cena nodded silently, a small smile on his face. "She's carrying the message forward," he said. "That's the best outcome we could hope for." It wasn't long before both men decided to return to the town for a small reunion. They wanted to see the siblings again, meet the people whose lives had been touched, and witness firsthand the difference one act of courage could make. When they arrived, they were greeted warmly by teachers, neighbors, and the children from the project the girl had started. The town seemed brighter, more connected, as if everyone had learned to pay more attention to each other. The siblings ran toward them immediately, the boy holding the same toy wrestling belt he had been given months ago, and the girl waving enthusiastically. "We've been practicing safety drills," the boy said proudly. "We want to be ready if someone needs help." The Rock smiled. "You've done more than that. You've shown everyone what courage looks like." Cena crouched to the boy's level. "And remember, even when people aren't watching, small acts of care are never wasted." The siblings led them around the town, showing how the project had grown. Children were practicing safety exercises, teaching each other how to swim, how to notice signs of distress, and how to respond calmly. Adults watched with pride, explaining how the community had become more connected and aware. Later, the siblings shared a quiet moment with The Rock and Cena near the water. At the same beach where everything had begun, the girl looked out at the waves, her eyes reflective. "I used to be scared of this place," she said softly. "But now it feels like it gave me something important." The Rock nodded. "It's amazing how a place can teach you lessons, isn't it?" Her brother added, "I'm not scared anymore because I know people can help. And maybe I can help others too." Cena smiled. "Exactly. That's the most important part. Courage grows when we help each other." The siblings laughed as they played in the shallow waves, tossing a ball and chasing each other, their energy carefree and full of life. The Rock and Cena watched them, thinking about how far they had come. What had started as a moment of fear and danger had turned into months of growth, teaching, and community care. That evening, as the sun set over the horizon, The Rock and Cena sat quietly on the sand. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, reflecting on the water. They didn't need to speak. The silence carried everything they felt: relief, pride, and a deep sense of fulfillment. Cena broke the silence gently. "You ever think about how one small moment can change so much? One glance, one decision, one choice to act?" The Rock nodded. "All the time. That day reminded me that noticing someone who's in trouble is more important than we realize. It's not about being strong or famous. It's about being present and willing to help." They both watched the siblings in the distance, laughing and running, and knew that the lesson they had learned together would continue to ripple through the community. Days later, the siblings wrote letters to the media, explaining how important it was to pay attention to others, to notice when someone might be in trouble, and to take action when it mattered. Their story spread farther than anyone expected, inspiring people not just in their town but across the country. Schools held workshops about awareness, Parents talked to their children about looking out for one another, and many communities started programs based on the lessons learned from that day. The Rock and Cena continued to support these efforts, not for recognition, but because it mattered. They spoke at schools, participated in community events, and shared messages about compassion and attention. They encouraged people to see and respond to SOS signals, whether it was a child waving a light on the beach, a friend in emotional pain, or a stranger quietly asking for help. Months later, the siblings returned to the beach once more, this time for a small ceremony organized by the local community. They presented the Rock and Cena with handmade plaques, each engraved with a message. "Thank you for seeing us when it mattered. You reminded us that courage and compassion are stronger than fear." The Rock accepted his plaque with humility. "The real reward," he said softly, "is seeing you two grow into confident, caring individuals. That's worth more than anything else," Cena added. "And remembering that small actions matter. Every act of awareness can ripple farther than we ever imagine." The siblings stood tall, proud, and confident. They had taken the lessons from that day, the fear, the bravery, and the help they received, and turned them into something bigger than themselves. Their community had grown closer, and their lives were forever changed. As the sun set and the waves gently lapped the shore, the Rock, Cena, and the siblings stood together, watching the horizon. For a moment, time felt still. The ocean that had once been frightening now seemed peaceful, a symbol of life's unpredictability and the power of human compassion. The girl turned to them and said, "I'll never forget that day. Not because it was scary, but because it showed me what people can do when they care. I'll always try to notice, always try to help." Her brother nodded in agreement. "And I'll make sure I do the same. I want to help people just like you helped me." The Rock smiled. "That's all anyone can ask for, and to carry the lessons forward." Cena said quietly, "And remember, it doesn't stop here. Every person you help, every moment you notice, creates a chain of kindness and courage." As they walked back from the water, the evening light cast long shadows behind them. The siblings held hands, their steps confident and sure. The Rock and Cena walked beside them, feeling a quiet sense of peace and accomplishment. The day that had begun with fear and uncertainty had grown into months of learning, growth, and inspiration. Even after leaving the beach that evening, the story of that day continued to echo. People shared it online, in classrooms, and in communities. The lessons were simple but powerful. Notice when someone is in need, act with compassion, and never underestimate the impact of courage, no matter how small it may seem. Years later, the girl and her brother would remember the day not as a day of fear, but as a day that shaped their lives. They learned that courage isn't about fighting or strength alone. It's about seeing the unseen, hearing the unheard, and acting when it matters. The Rock and Cena, too, carried that lesson with them. Fame and strength were fleeting, but the value of human connection, compassion, and awareness was timeless. They knew that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism weren't performed on stage or in the ring, but in quiet moments when someone noticed a signal, chose to care, and made a difference. And so, the story ended not with applause or headlines, but with something far more lasting: the knowledge that courage, compassion, and attention could change lives, and that even the smallest signal, when noticed, could create ripples of hope that last a lifetime.